The millionaire's daughter refused to eat until the maid discovered something that shocked everyone. Richard Moreau sat motionless in his office on the upper floor of his grand estate, his eyes lost beyond the wide glass window. In front of him lay intricate architectural sketches and million-dollar contracts, yet his hand trembled over a cup of cold coffee. At 45, Richard had everything most people could dream of: fame, fortune, a thriving career. But his heart carried a weight no fortune could ease. His daughter, Emily, only 5 years old, was slowly fading before his eyes. She refused food, could not sleep, and fevers came and went like mysterious flames burning her fragile body. Since the day Claire, his gentle wife, had passed away in a sudden accident, the vast mansion had become nothing but a hollow emptiness. Richard had turned to the best doctors, renowned nutritionists, even the most advanced medical devices to monitor Emily's every heartbeat. But nothing worked. He was drowning in despair, like a ship adrift in a foggy ocean with no compass to guide it. The days inside the Moreau mansion had become a loop of silence and tension. Richard rarely left his office, where unfinished sketches piled high, and the ticking clock on the wall emphasized the emptiness of each passing minute. He canceled meetings, declined projects. Once an award-winning architect, he was now only a weary man with sunken eyes from sleepless nights. In that void, Margaret, Claire's older sister, appeared more and more often. She entered the house with a caring air, carrying jars of nutritious soup and soothing teas. Richard appreciated her attention, but deep inside, an unease gnawed at him whenever she was around, an unexplainable coldness. Emily did not respond to Margaret's affection. She often turned her face away, refusing the spoonfuls Margaret tried to feed her. "Just one bite, sweetheart," Margaret would say sweetly, yet Emily's eyes brimmed with fear. Richard saw it, but he was powerless, unwilling to confront the oddness. One morning, when Richard decided to hire extra help for the house, partly for his aging housekeeper, partly because he himself was exhausted, Helena Ruiz entered their lives. A 30-year-old woman, small in stature, dressed in worn but clean clothes, carrying an old fabric bag with her cleaning tools. Her first impression was ordinary, but her eyes were different, calm, deep, as though she had witnessed so much pain that nothing could truly frighten her anymore. That morning, as the housekeeper showed Helena around the kitchen, they heard a faint cry from upstairs. Not a tantrum, but the muffled sobs of a soul that had given up on being heard. Helena stopped. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with quiet determination. "May I meet her?" Inside Emily's room, the sight broke Helena's heart. The little girl sat curled on the bed, clutching a worn teddy bear, her eyes swollen from crying. On her tiny wrist, the smartwatch blinked red, Richard's way of tracking her heart rate, though numbers could never capture a child's silent sorrow. Helena did not rush forward. She simply sat on the floor beside the bed, taking out a few small towels to fold. Simple, slow movements, with no pressure. Emily peeked through her small fingers at the stranger. "Hello," Helena said softly, without direct eye contact. "I'm Helena. I came to help keep this house clean." There was no answer, but Emily stopped crying. "When I was your age," Helena continued, still folding, "I had a teddy bear too. I named him Courage. Strange name, right? But he helped me feel brave when everything felt too hard." Emily lowered her hand slightly. Her eyes flickered with curiosity. "What's your teddy's name?" Helena asked, finally meeting her gaze. For the first time in weeks, Emily whispered, "His name is Brownie, because his nose is pink." Her voice trembled but was clear. Helena smiled. "That's a wonderful name. I bet Brownie has been on many adventures with you." And that was the beginning. Not through renowned doctors or expensive machines, but through a simple conversation about a teddy bear, the first spark of connection was lit. 3 days later, the impossible happened. As Helena prepared a plate of buttered toast cut into little triangles, Emily appeared at the kitchen door, dragging Brownie along. "Hungry?" Helena asked, as if it were the most natural thing. Emily nodded. Then, sitting at the table, she began eating slowly, piece by piece. The housekeeper froze, eyes welling with tears. Richard, walking in at that moment, could only stand in silence. His tears fell when he heard his daughter whisper, "Helena makes magic triangles." Since the day Emily took her first bite of the magic triangle toast, the atmosphere in the mansion slowly began to change. It wasn't a sudden transformation, but rather like a faint beam of light piercing a dark room, softening the shadows. Helena never pressured her. She didn't ask Emily what she wanted to eat or if she was feeling better. Instead, she simply sat beside her, folding towels, dusting off old comic books, or sometimes sharing a story about her own poor childhood. That quiet presence was what encouraged Emily to open her heart. One afternoon, Richard entered the kitchen and froze at the sight before him. Emily sat on a high chair, holding a tiny sandwich. Helena sat across, pretending to taste an invisible bite in her hand. Emily giggled, the first laughter Richard had heard in months. His chest tightened. He had tried so many times with expensive toys, hired therapists, but nothing worked. Yet this woman, with nothing more than a gentle smile and simple gestures, had brought joy back to his daughter. "Thank you," Richard whispered after Emily ran out to the garden with Brownie. Helena shook her head, smiling softly. "I didn't do anything. I just waited until she was ready." But Richard knew it wasn't that simple. He noticed the way Helena paid attention to small details, the way Emily held her spoon, the way her eyes searched for safety. Perhaps Helena had become the anchor Emily lost when Claire passed away. In the days that followed, Helena gently brought Richard into their small meals. At first, Emily would only eat if Helena was present. Then one day, Helena pretended to be busy, setting a plate before Richard. "Why don't you try this first, Father?" Emily hesitated, watching him. Richard smiled, took a bite. "It's delicious." She blinked, then quietly pushed the plate toward him. "Eat with me, Daddy." Tears nearly spilled from Richard's eyes. From that moment on, meals were no longer battles. They became moments of bonding. Housekeeper Sueli often watched from afar, her eyes misty. She knew well, no doctor, no amount of money could buy the warmth Helena had given the child. Yet that peace unsettled Margaret. On her visits, she began to notice Emily clinging more to Helena than to herself. Once Margaret brought a pot of soup, but Emily shook her head. "I want Helena's triangle bread." Margaret's face stiffened for a moment, though she quickly masked it with a forced smile. Richard noticed, but he didn't dare question it. All he knew was that, for the first time in months, his daughter had a spark of life. At night, watching Emily sleep peacefully, Richard whispered to himself, "Perhaps I've found the one who can bring her back to the light." In the weeks that followed, the Moreau household seemed to bloom again. Emily's giggles echoed through the hallways, mingled with Max's barks in the garden. Richard began to believe that miracles truly existed, but that very miracle made someone else uneasy. Margaret began visiting more frequently. Each time she carried something, a jar of restorative soup, a tea to help her sleep, or imported vitamins. She always said, "I know doctors better than anyone, Richard. I just want to help." Out of politeness and lingering desperation, Richard often allowed her to bring food into the kitchen. But Helena noticed more closely. She realized that on the days Emily ate what Margaret brought, the fevers returned. The little girl grew restless, sleepless, her smartwatch blinking with alarms again. Yet on the days she ate only the simple meals Helena prepared, bread, fruit, yogurt, everything was calm. One afternoon, while hanging laundry near the kitchen window, Helena noticed the flower bed below. Roses, once bright, now sagged, their leaves yellowing. She bent closer and saw scraps of vegetables and herbs mixed into the soil, as if someone had poured leftovers there. The sour smell made her shiver. Her instincts stirred. Helena began recording in a small notebook the dates Margaret visited, the food she delivered, Emily's condition afterward. Page by page, the notes grew, lines and arrows connecting into a terrifying picture. One day, while cleaning the spice rack, Helena found a small glass vial hidden behind neatly labeled jars. Its label was half torn, leaving only faint letters. Her pulse quickened as she held it. Clearly, it didn't belong in Swaley's meticulously organized kitchen. Helena knew she had to be careful. She had no proof, only instincts and scattered observations. But in Emily's eyes, every time she looked at food from Margaret's hand, Helena read something unmistakable: the primal fear of a child. That night, after Emily fell asleep, Richard sat in his study, head in hands. Helena approached, hesitated, then spoke softly. "Mr. Richard, do you think there might be something else happening to Emily, beyond illness?" Richard looked up, eyes weary and guarded. "What are you suggesting?" Helena swallowed hard, unable to continue. She wasn't ready, not without evidence. But inside her, suspicion burned fiercely. For days, Helena carried her suspicions in silence, watching every move Margaret made, waiting for the moment when truth would betray itself. That afternoon, it finally came. In the spotless kitchen, Margaret was preparing a cup of chamomile tea for Emily. Her voice was sweet, reassuring. "Drink this, dear. It will help you sleep." But from the doorway, Helena clearly saw Margaret discreetly take out a small vial from her purse and drip a strange liquid into the tea. Helena's heart pounded. She knew that if she accused Margaret too soon, Richard would never believe her. But the truth unfolding before her eyes was impossible to ignore. Emily entered, her gaze fixed on the cup, her face tense. Her lips trembled. I don't want it." Margaret tried to hide her unease. "Just one sip, sweetheart. This tea will help you sleep." Helena quickly intervened. "Why don't you take a sip first to reassure Emily?" Margaret froze. For a brief moment, her fluster was plain to see. Then she forced a smile, setting the cup aside. "I already had some earlier. Too much will keep me awake." Silence filled the kitchen. Emily clung to Helena, her eyes wide with fear. Helena knew she had just witnessed what had only been instinct until then. Days later, an even more horrifying proof emerged. Max, the once healthy dog, suddenly vomited violently in the garden. Beside him lay a familiar porcelain bowl, the very kind Margaret often used to bring soup for Emily. Richard panicked, rushing Max to the veterinary clinic. Helena went with him, her heart sinking. After a brief examination, the veterinarian shook his head. "There are traces of stimulants in his stomach. For adults, in small doses, it might be harmless, but for animals or children, it's extremely dangerous. It causes rapid heartbeat, fever, vomiting." Helena went cold. Those symptoms, they were exactly what Emily had suffered for so long. That evening, as Richard brought a weakened Max back home, Helena sat in her small room, opening her notebook. She began recording every detail: the days Margaret visited, what food she brought, Emily's symptoms afterward. She collected leftover samples, carefully wrapping them. Piece by piece, the puzzle grew clearer, painting a terrifying picture. A few days later, while cleaning Claire's old room, Helena accidentally knocked over a worn notebook from a desk drawer. It was Claire's diary. The shaky words revealed themselves under the lamp. "Margaret cooked for me again today. I feel dizzy, my stomach aches, but I don't want to worry Richard. If I refuse, she sulks." On another page, "I'm scared. After every meal Margaret prepares, I feel weaker. I want to believe she cares, but sometimes the look in her eyes chills me. Helena clutched the diary, her hands trembling. Tears welled as the truth unfolded. Claire had endured the same torment, forced to eat, her health drained away within these very walls. Claire had not been fortunate enough to escape. And now Emily was repeating her mother's fate. Helena knew the time had come for the truth to be revealed. She could no longer let Emily live in danger, nor allow Richard to blindly trust the woman who had harmed both his wife and his child. One rainy evening, Richard returned home after a long day's work. Helena was waiting in the kitchen, Claire's diary and her own notebook laid out on the table. As Richard stepped in, she drew a deep breath. "Mr. Richard," Helena's voice trembled, but remained steady. "You need to see this." Richard frowned, opening the worn diary. Claire's shaky handwriting appeared beneath the light. He read slowly, eyes widening as each line pierced his memory like a blade. "Every time I eat Margaret's food, I feel dizzy. But if I refuse, she sulks. I fear Margaret's gaze. It chills me to the bone." Richard dropped the diary, his hands trembling. "No, Claire never told me." Helena pushed her own notebook forward. "Look, these are my records of every time Margaret brought food for Emily and the symptoms that followed. And Max's poisoning, everything matches." Just then the front door opened. Margaret stepped in, rain dripping from her coat, a box of cookies in hand. Her familiar smile appeared, but when she saw the two of them in the kitchen, her eyes darkened. "What's going on here?" Margaret asked, her voice sweet but tinged with suspicion. Richard rose, his voice hoarse. "Margaret, do you have anything to explain? About Claire's diary? About Emily?" Margaret gently shook her head, her voice trembling, though she tried to keep her composure. "What are you talking about, Richard? I don't understand." Richard gave no reply, only silently handed her the diary. For a split second, her face faltered, but then she let out a soft laugh. "You really believe this nonsense? An old diary? A few scribbles from a maid? And you choose to trust them over me, the one who's been by your side all these years?" Richard turned away, fists clenched. In his eyes was a storm, the weight of old loyalty to Margaret and the undeniable evidence before him. Helena stepped forward, her voice firm. "I saw you pour something into Emily's tea. If I hadn't stopped you, who knows what would have happened? This isn't fiction. This is truth." Margaret's smile vanished. The softness she usually wore shattered, revealing a cold, sharp stare. "Who do you think you are?" Margaret spat. "Just a lowly intruder in this house, clinging to the trust of a weak child." Suddenly, Emily appeared in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear brownie. Her eyes welled with tears. "I don't want you here anymore. I want to be with Helena." The words fell like a hammer on the tense silence. Richard turned to Margaret. He saw the fear in his daughter's eyes and the emptiness in the gaze that once belonged to Claire. He stepped forward, shielding Emily behind him, his voice resolute. "Enough, Margaret. I've been blind for too long. From today, you no longer have any right to set foot in this house." Thunder crashed against the windows, drowning out the ragged breathing that filled the heavy kitchen air. Richard hadn't yet recovered from casting Margaret out when her voice tore through, shrill and furious. "You're a fool, Richard. All these years, the love I've given you, and you never noticed. Do you think I did all this out of hatred? No, I did it out of love. A love you never once returned." Richard stood frozen, his face twisted between horror and disgust. At that moment, Sueli, the longtime housekeeper, appeared. Her hands shook as she held out a tablet. "Mr. Richard, Ms. Helena, I found this on the kitchen cameras." The screen lit up. Footage showed Margaret slipping a vial from her purse, pouring liquid into Emily's food. Irrefutable. Margaret's face paled, then flushed. Her false smile dissolved, replaced by raw fury. "Fine!" she screamed. "Yes, it was me. I poured it into Claire's meals. I made her weaker day by day. And Emily, too, because only when they fall will you finally see me, Richard. Do you know what it feels like to be ignored since college? I loved you. I've loved you my entire life." Helena's grip tightened on the table's edge. Quietly, she pressed record on her phone, capturing every damning word. At the same time, she sent a quick alert to the police. Richard trembled, his voice hoarse. That isn't love. It's sickness. You killed Claire. You nearly destroyed Emily." At Claire's name, Margaret snapped. She lunged at Emily, seizing the little girl's arm, yanking her close. Emily screamed, thrashing in terror. "If you won't love me," Margaret shrieked, eyes blazing with madness, "then Emily will join Claire. I'll reunite them." In her hand was a small glass vial, the very substance that had tormented Claire and Emily. The cap flipped open, the liquid glinting under the light. "No!" Richard surged forward, but Margaret pulled back, holding Emily as a shield. "Daddy!" Emily cried, her tiny hands reaching out. "I don't want to go. I want to stay with you and Helena." Helena saw her chance. In the instant Margaret shouted, Helena lunged, grabbing the wrist holding the vial. With a fierce yank, she sent it flying, shattering across the floor. But Margaret was swift. She seized a crystal vase from the shelf and smashed it against Helena's head. The crash rang through the kitchen. Blood streamed down Helena's forehead as she staggered and collapsed. "Helena!" Richard roared. Emily quickly ran back to her father's side. Margaret panted, her face twisted in hatred and desperation. "You'll have to choose, Richard. Love me, or lose everything." Then the wail of sirens pierced the storm. Blue and red lights flashed through the rain-streaked window. The front door burst open, 2 officers storming in. Margaret recoiled, panic flashing in her eyes. Emily sobbed, stretching her small arms toward Richard. In the chaos, one officer rushed forward, swiftly restraining Margaret. The snap of handcuffs sealed the nightmare shut. Richard swept Emily into his arms, his body trembling. "It's over, sweetheart. I'm here. No one will take you away again." Sueli knelt beside Helena, blood soaking her handkerchief. "Quickly, she's losing too much blood." Paramedics arrived, lifting Helena onto a stretcher. Just before darkness claimed her, she heard Richard's broken voice calling after her. "Helena, you saved us. I won't let you fight alone anymore." The ambulance lights blurred in her fading vision. And then everything went black. An exclusive Noah Stories production. If you see it elsewhere, please come back to our official channel to enjoy it in full. The ambulance sirens had faded, but their echo still haunted Richard's mind. That night, he sat frozen in the hospital hallway, his calloused hands trembling as they clenched together. Emily lay asleep in his lap, worn out from hours of sobbing. The light above the emergency room glared, each passing second stretching into eternity. In Richard's chest rose a terror he hadn't known before, the fear of losing Helena, the woman who had risked everything to protect his daughter. At last, the door swung open. A doctor emerged, voice calm and steady. "She lost a lot of blood, but the wound has been stitched. Fortunately, there's no serious brain injury. She'll need rest and monitoring, but she'll recover." Richard fell to his knees, tears streaming, relief and regret all at once. Emily clung to his neck, whispering, "Daddy, Helena won't leave us, right?" He kissed her hair. "No, sweetheart. She's stronger than we ever knew." Days later, Helena awoke. The room was white, carrying the faint scent of antiseptic. She opened her eyes to find Richard sitting at her bedside, dark circles under his eyes, but a light sparking when he saw her stir. "Helena," his voice broke. "Thank you. Without you, I would have lost Emily, and myself." She gave a faint smile, her lips dry. You don't owe me anything. I only did what my heart told me to." Emily ran forward, throwing her arms around Helena. "Please don't leave me again. I was so scared." Helena stroked her back, tears sliding down. In that moment, she realized their bond was no longer just circumstance. It was blood deep. She was no longer just a maid. She was the anchor Emily needed. And Richard, too. During Helena's days in the hospital, Richard cared for her devotedly. He brought flowers from the garden to fill the room with color, read aloud Emily's favorite short stories, even attempted porridge, clumsy but heartfelt. One evening, while Emily dozed on the sofa, Richard sat beside Helena, voice low. "Claire once told me I was too busy to see what really mattered. I lost her, but because of you, I've learned that being a father isn't about providing, it's about being there. Helena, you didn't just save Emily, you saved me." Helena's heart stirred, but she stayed silent. A distance still lay between them, class past, wounds yet to heal. Meanwhile, news of Margaret spread. Headlines screamed, "Respected woman arrested for poisoning." Richard's family was thrust into the whirlwind of gossip. But in the quiet hospital room, only 3 souls sought peace together. One afternoon, Emily placed her small hand on both Helena's and Richard's, pressing them together. "Daddy, let's not leave her alone anymore. I want us to be a family. All 3. The child's innocent words silenced the room. Richard squeezed Helena's hand, his gaze steady. "Emily's right. We've already lost too much. I don't want to lose again. Helena, will you give us a chance?" She met his eyes, tired yet filled with genuine love. Her heart trembled. Perhaps after the storm, this was the dawn they had been waiting for. In the weeks after Helena's recovery, light slowly returned to the Moreau household. Emily's laughter filled the halls again, and Helena's gentle presence eased the silence that had once suffocated the mansion. But Richard knew peace was fragile. Shadows often lingered where wounds had been deepest. Margaret remained in custody, awaiting trial. The press covered her story endlessly, every headline a blade slashing at the family's dignity. Richard didn't care. He only longed for peace for Emily and Helena. But he did not know, behind the prison bars, Margaret was weaving a new scheme. In the damp cell, her eyes still gleamed with cunning. "If I cannot have Richard, then he will never have peace," she muttered, lips curling into a twisted smile. She began to write letters, anonymous messages sent to authorities, to journalists, even to distant relatives of Richard. In them, she accused Helena of manipulating Emily's emotions, painting her as a schemer exploiting tragedy to invade a wealthy family. The rumors spread like wildfire. One morning, as Richard walked Emily to school, he overheard the whispers behind his back. "That's the child poisoned by the maid's influence." Emily clutched his hand tightly, eyes brimming with tears, too innocent to understand why words could cut so deeply. Helena received anonymous texts, venomous in tone. "You'll only ever be a replacement." Claire was his only true love. Each word carved into her scarred heart, stirring the old ache of class and inadequacy. At night, Richard wandered the silent halls, his hand brushing against the frame of Claire's photo. Memories pressed against him like ghosts, but this time, instead of collapsing, he held on to the thought of Emily's laughter with Helena by her side. That fragile hope steadied him against Margaret's lingering shadow. He stepped into Helena's room, where she slept fitfully, and took her hand, whispering, "No matter what the world says, I know the truth. You saved my daughter. You saved me. No one can take that away." Helena's eyes opened, and through tears she saw not the broken man she had first known, but a mountain, steady, unwavering, where she and Emily could finally rest. Meanwhile, Emily too began to grasp the cruelty of lies. One evening she sat by Helena's bedside, clutching Brownie, whispering, "They can say whatever they want, but I know you're my family." Her innocent words healed more than any medicine could. Helena embraced her, feeling her own heart beating its way back toward light. Margaret, behind the iron bars, hadn't stopped scheming, but this time her poisoned arrows could not pierce the shield of love and trust. Richard, Helena, and Emily, 3 broken souls, were learning how to become a family. And that was a strength Margaret would never destroy. Months passed, and the mansion that once drowned in shadows had transformed into a home brimming with life. Heavy drapes were replaced with light-colored curtains, windows thrown open to welcome the morning sun. Emily's laughter rang through the halls, mingling with Max's cheerful barks as they chased each other across the green lawn. Emily was healthier than ever. Her cheeks glowed pink, her eyes sparkled with light. She ran to Helena, wrapping her arms around her legs, exclaiming, "Look, Helena, Max learned how to fetch." Helena bent down, brushing the girl's soft hair, her heart overflowing with joy. Nearby, Richard leaned against the doorway, watching the scene with a gaze full of love. He was no longer the lonely man of yesterday, but a father, a man who had rediscovered what it meant to have a home. Day by day, the bond between Richard and Helena grew, first in hesitant glances, then in late-night conversations, until it became the quiet harmony of 2 healing hearts. Beneath the garden's canopy, Richard held Helena's hand and spoke in a voice steady yet tender. "We've endured too much loss. It's time for a new beginning. Helena, will you marry me?" Tears shimmered in her eyes, but her smile was radiant as dawn. "Yes, I will." Their wedding was simple, yet warm. No lavish rituals, no noisy crowds, just a garden in full bloom, close friends, and the quiet blessing of nature. Helena wore a plain white dress, her hair adorned with wildflowers. Richard waited under the sunlit arch, his gaze fixed on her every step. Emily, in a frilly little dress, carried a basket of petals, scattering them into the air with giggles. "Helena, now I can call you Mom." Laughter mingled with applause, with the rustling of leaves, with the beating of hearts. As Richard and Helena exchanged vows, it was clear. This was not just the union of 2 people, but the healing of an entire family. Elsewhere, in a cold prison cell, Margaret received an envelope. Inside was a wedding photograph, Richard, Helena, and Emily, beneath the floral arch, holding hands, radiant with joy. Margaret gripped the picture, fury and despair flashing in her eyes. 6 years behind bars was the price of her obsession and the final punctuation to her misguided schemes. Back in the garden, as night descended and golden lights glowed across the blossoms, the little family sat together. Emily rested her head on Helena's shoulder, Richard's arms wrapped around them both. "Now we're really a family, aren't we, Daddy?" Emily asked, her voice drowsy. Richard looked at Helena, then at his daughter, answering softly. "Yes, sweetheart. A family no one can break apart." "Huh." Helena smiled, tears glistening under the warm light. And in that moment, they all understood. True family is not only where we are born, but where we choose to belong, with love, trust, and sacrifice. And so, beneath the quiet glow of garden lights and the warmth of joined hands, they discovered what Claire had once whispered to Richard long ago, that true love is not bound by blood, but by choice. Happiness had not simply returned. It had been rebuilt, piece by fragile piece, into a family that no darkness could ever break again.